The alien fleet commander Zekthor stared at the tactical display with all four of his eyes. Something was wrong. Very wrong. 3 of his warships had simply stopped responding. No distress signals. No explosions. They just went dark one after another, within the span of 2 standard cycles. "Status report," he demanded, his mandibles clicking nervously. The communications officer turned, her skin shifting to a worried purple hue. "Nothing, Commander. The ships are still there on long-range sensors, but all systems are offline. Life support, weapons, shields, everything." Zekthor had been hunting humans for 6 months now. The war had started when humanity refused to surrender their outer colonies to the Kresh Dominion. The Dominion had expected an easy victory. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, barely a century into space travel. They had no powerful allies, no ancient weapons, no psychic abilities like the other races, but humans were stubborn. And clever. The fleet had been tasked with clearing out human settlements in the Andromeda sector. It should have been simple. The Dominion had superior numbers, better shields, and weapons that could crack planets. Yet somehow humans kept slipping through their fingers like sand. "Dispatch a scout team to the nearest dark ship," Zekthor ordered. "Full combat gear. I want to know what happened." 2 hours later, the scout team returned. Their leader, a veteran soldier named Prax, looked shaken. Prax had fought in 17 campaigns and never showed fear. "Until now." "Report," Zekthor said quietly. "The crew is alive, Commander. All of them. But they're unconscious. Every single one of them. Medical scans show they were hit with some kind of electromagnetic pulse, followed by a neural stunner of unknown design. Whoever did this went through the entire ship, deck by deck, and neutralized everyone without killing a single soul." Zekthor felt his blood run cold. "What about the weapons?" "The data cores?" "Intact, sir. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was destroyed. It's like someone just wanted to prove they could walk through our defenses whenever they wanted." The commander pulled up the sector map. The 3 ships formed a triangle, each one positioned along their supply route. Someone was sending a message. Someone was telling the Dominion that their fleet wasn't safe anywhere. "Pull all ships back to defensive formation," Zekthor commanded. "Double the sensor sweeps. I want to know if a dust particle moves in this sector." But even as he gave the orders, he knew it might not be enough. Because somewhere out there, a human was playing a very different kind of war. Lieutenant Marcus Chen floated in the darkness between stars, his specialized suit making him nearly invisible against the void. The suit was humanity's latest secret weapon, developed by a team that had studied how animals like octopuses could change their skin patterns. The suit didn't just reflect light, it absorbed sensor waves, heat signatures, and even gravitational distortions. Marcus wasn't a soldier in the traditional sense. He was an airman, trained in the old ways when pilots had to think fast and strike faster. But this war didn't need traditional pilots. It needed ghosts. His small ship, barely larger than a fighter jet, hung 3 kilometers from the Kresh fleet. It was coated in the same adaptive material as his suit. To any sensor, it looked like empty space. To the naked eye, it was invisible. Marcus checked his equipment one more time. The electromagnetic pulse cannons were charged. The neural stunner drones were ready for deployment. And most importantly, his escape route was clear. This was his 14th strike in 3 months. Each time he would drift close to an enemy ship, disable it without casualties, and vanish before anyone knew he was there. Command had given him a simple mission: make the aliens afraid. Make them doubt their sensors. Make them wonder if humanity had technology far beyond what they showed. The truth was simpler. Humanity didn't have better technology. They just had Marcus, his custom ship, and a willingness to do things no sane person would try. He activated his thrusters, barely a whisper of movement, and began his approach to the next target, a Kresh destroyer isolated from the main fleet for routine maintenance. Perfect. As he drifted closer, Marcus thought about why he volunteered for this mission. Most people thought he was crazy. Maybe they were right. But he had seen what the Kresh did to human colonies. He had lost friends, family, people he loved. This was his way of fighting back. The destroyer grew larger in his view screen. He could see the faint lights of the crew moving inside through the windows. They had no idea death floated nearby, except Marcus wasn't bringing death. He was bringing something worse: uncertainty. He positioned his ship beneath the destroyer's main hull, exactly where the sensors had a blind spot. It was a flaw in Kresh ship design that humanity had discovered early in the war, a tiny gap in their coverage that most would overlook. But Marcus specialized in finding those gaps. The electromagnetic pulse fired silently in space. Inside the destroyer, every system would be crashing right now. Emergency lights would be failing. Crew members would be scrambling to understand what happened. Marcus launched his neural stunner drones. 12 small spheres that would slip through the ship's ventilation systems, releasing a harmless but powerful sleeping gas. In 10 minutes, everyone aboard would be unconscious. In 12 hours, they would wake up with headaches and no memory of what happened. He waited, floating in the silence of space. His heart beat steady. His breathing was calm. This was what he trained for. This was what he was good at. 15 minutes later, his sensors confirmed the ship was secure. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Another mission complete. Another message sent to the Kresh Dominion. Humans are here and you cannot stop us. He fired his thrusters and slipped away into the darkness, leaving no trace he was ever there. Back at Human Command, they would receive his encrypted signal. Another enemy ship neutralized without a single death. Another legend growing around the mysterious attacker the aliens had started calling the Silent Hawk. But Marcus didn't care about legends or glory. He cared about one thing: keeping humanity's enemies off balance long enough for the real military to organize a proper defense. Every ship he disabled was one less ship attacking human worlds. Every moment the aliens spent looking over their shoulders was a moment they weren't attacking. The war was far from over. But tonight humanity had struck again, and the Kresh had no idea who or what had hit them. Marcus set course for his hidden base, deep in an asteroid field where no sensors could find him. Tomorrow he would strike again, and the day after that, and the day after that. Because that's what humans did. They adapted, they persevered, and they never ever gave up. Admiral Kresheva sat in her command throne, her scales reflecting the cold blue light of the bridge displays. She was the highest-ranking military officer in the sector, and her reputation had been built on crushing rebellions without mercy. But this human problem was different. It was making her look weak. "Show me the pattern again," she commanded. The tactical officer projected a 3-dimensional map of the sector. Red dots marked where ships had been disabled over the past 3 months. 17 ships in total. All of them had been alone or separated from the main fleet. All of them had been disabled without warning. And all of them had been left intact, crews unharmed but unconscious. "It's always the same method," the tactical officer explained. "Electromagnetic pulse followed by neural suppression. The attacker gets in and out without being detected. We've analyzed every sensor log from the affected ships. Nothing. Not even a gravitational anomaly." Kresheva drummed her claws on the armrest. "What about the human fleet movements? Any correlation?" "None, Admiral. The main human battle groups are all accounted for, engaged with our forces in other sectors. Whoever is doing this is operating independently." That was what frightened her most. If this was an official human operation, they could counter it with military force. But if this was one person, one ship acting alone, then it meant humanity had developed technology that made their ships completely invisible to Dominion sensors. Or worse, it meant one human was simply better at war than her entire fleet. "What do the intelligence reports say about human special operations?" she asked. The intelligence officer, a thin creature with too many joints, stepped forward. "Humans have a long history of asymmetric warfare, Admiral. They call it guerrilla tactics. Small units operating independently, striking targets of opportunity, avoiding direct confrontation. They use these methods in their own wars before they reach space. So this is normal for them?" "Yes, Admiral. What's unusual is that we're only detecting one operator. Usually humans work in teams. This suggests either they have very few ships capable of this stealth technology, or this individual is operating without official sanction." Kresheva considered this. A rogue human warrior, striking at the Dominion for personal reasons. It was almost honorable in a primitive way. Almost. "Triple the patrols," she ordered. "No ship travels alone. Minimum formations of 5 vessels. And I want every scientist in the fleet working on a way to detect this ghost. Offer a reward of 10,000 credits to anyone who can give me information on how to find this human." As her officers rushed to carry out her orders, Kresheva stared at the map. 17 ships, not destroyed, just neutralized. The human could have killed thousands of her people but chose not to. Why, was it mercy, or was it strategy? She realized with growing certainty that it was strategy. Dead crews would make the Dominion angry. Unconscious crews made them afraid. Fear was a weapon, and this human was wielding it like a master. Marcus woke up in his hidden base with the usual headache. The neural interface he used to control his ship's systems always left him with a dull pain behind his eyes. Small price to pay for the advantage it gave him. His base was a hollowed-out asteroid in the middle of nowhere. It had taken him 2 months to set it up. Using mining equipment and fabricators he had salvaged from destroyed human outposts, the asteroid's mineral composition naturally blocked sensors, and he had added additional shielding just to be sure. He pulled himself out of his sleeping pod and floated through the zero-gravity corridors to the command center. His ship, the Silent Hawk as he had named it, was docked in the main bay, connected to the base's power systems for recharging. The ship was beautiful in a deadly way. It was less than 30 meters long, shaped like a knife blade. Every surface was covered in the adaptive camouflage material that made it invisible to conventional sensors. The engines were modified to produce almost no heat signature. Even the weapons were designed to be silent, leaving no energy traces. Marcus had built most of it himself, with help from a network of human engineers who believed in his mission. They sent him supplies through secret channels delivered to dead-drop coordinates that changed every week. Officially, he didn't exist. His death had been faked 6 months ago during a crash raid on a human outpost. As far as the records showed, Lieutenant Marcus Chen was just another casualty of war. But the reality was different. Marcus had been chosen for a Black Ops program that didn't officially exist. The mission was simple: disrupt enemy operations through unconventional means. Create fear, make the aliens paranoid, force them to waste resources on security instead of attacking. He checked his secure communication array. 3 new supply drops were scheduled for this week. Good. He was running low on neural stunner gas and his ship's adaptive camouflage needed maintenance. There was also a coded message from command. He decrypted it using his personal key. The message was brief. Continue operations. Your work is having significant impact. Enemy fleet movements have become defensive. Multiple ships being held back as escorts. You have bought us 2 months. Need 4 more. Can you deliver? Marcus allowed himself a rare smile. 2 months was good. 4 months would be challenging. But challenging was what he did best. He typed his response. Affirmative. Increasing operation tempo. We'll target supply convoys next. Silent Hawk out. He sent the message through a series of relay satellites that would bounce it across 3 systems before reaching command. Even if the crash intercepted it, they would never trace it back to his location. Marcus spent the next several hours planning his next series of strikes. The Kresh were adapting, traveling in larger groups now. That was fine. It just meant he needed to be more creative. He pulled up intelligence reports on Kresh supply routes. Every fleet needed supplies, ammunition, fuel, food. Cutting off those supplies wouldn't destroy the enemy, but it would slow them down. Force them to retreat or reduce their operational capacity. There was a convoy scheduled to pass through the Helix Nebula in 3 days. 5 transport ships with 2 destroyer escorts. Normally that would be too dangerous. But Marcus had noticed something about Kresh escort patterns. The destroyers always positioned themselves at the front and rear of the convoy, leaving the middle vulnerable. If he could get inside that formation, take out one transport without alerting the others, he could slip away before the escorts even knew something was wrong. It was risky, more risky than his usual operations. But if command needed 4 more months, he had to escalate. Marcus began running simulations on his tactical computer, testing different approach vectors and escape routes. He ran each simulation 50 times, looking for the path with the highest success probability. After 6 hours of work, he found it. A 92% chance of success if everything went perfectly. A 78% chance if things went moderately wrong, and only a 12% chance of being detected and killed. He had survived on worse odds. Marcus initialized his ship's pre-flight sequence and began loading equipment: neural stunners, electromagnetic pulse mines, emergency medical supplies, and enough rations for 2 weeks in case he had to hide in deep space. As the Silent Hawk's systems came online, Marcus felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. This was what he lived for now. Not the glory, not the recognition, But the knowledge that every mission he completed meant fewer human civilians under alien attack. He strapped into his pilot seat and connected the neural interface to his skull. The ship's systems merged with his thoughts, making the vessel feel like an extension of his own body. He could feel the engines, the weapons, the sensors as if they were his own limbs. Marcus guided the Silent Hawk out of the asteroid base and into open space. The stars stretched out before him, infinite and cold. Somewhere in that darkness the Kresh convoy was traveling, unaware that death was stalking them, except it wasn't death. It was something more subtle, something more human. It was hope. The Helix Nebula was beautiful and deadly. Massive clouds of ionized gas created natural sensor interference that made navigation difficult. Most ships avoided it unless absolutely necessary. But for supply convoys, it was the shortest route between two Kresh military bases. Marcus had been waiting here for 18 hours. His ship powered down to minimal systems, drifting like debris among the gas clouds. His suit recycled his air and water, and he had trained himself to stay awake for days if needed. Patience was as important as skill in this kind of work. His passive sensors finally detected the convoy. 5 large transport ships moving in a standard formation, with 2 destroyers bracketing them at front and rear. Exactly as intelligence had predicted, Marcus waited until the convoy was deep inside the nebula before making his move. The gas clouds would mask his approach and provide escape routes if things went wrong. He powered up his engines to barely 5%, just enough to match the convoy's speed. The Silent Hawk began gliding toward the middle transport ship, moving like a shadow through the colorful gases. The transport was massive compared to his ship, at least 10 times larger. It carried enough supplies to keep a battle group operational for 3 months. Food, ammunition, medical supplies, replacement parts. Destroying it would cripple the Kresh operations in this sector. But Marcus wasn't going to destroy it. He had a better plan. As he approached, he fired specialized anchoring cables that attached to the transport's hull with magnetic grips. The cables were coated in the same adaptive material as his ship, making them nearly invisible. Once secured, he reeled the Silent Hawk close to the transport's underbelly, hiding in the larger ship's sensor shadow. Now came the hard part. Marcus put on his spacesuit and grabbed his equipment pack. He opened the Silent Hawk's airlock and stepped out into space, using the cables to pull himself toward the transport's hull. The transport's hull was smooth metal, but Marcus had studied Kresh ship designs extensively. He knew where the maintenance hatches were located. He pulled himself along the hull until he found one, then used a specialized cutting tool to override the electronic lock. The hatch opened silently. Marcus slipped inside and sealed it behind him. He was now inside enemy territory with no backup and no easy escape route. His heart was pounding, but his hands were steady. This was the moment where training met reality. The interior of the transport was dimly lit and mostly automated. Kresh didn't waste crew on simple transport duties. Most of the ship was controlled by artificial intelligence, with maybe 10 crew members total to handle emergencies. Marcus activated his suit's camouflage mode. The material bent light around him, making him nearly invisible to the naked eye. He moved through the corridors quickly but carefully, following the mental map he had memorized. His first stop was the ship's communication array. He placed a small device on the main processor, a virus that would slowly corrupt outgoing messages. Not enough to be noticed immediately, but enough to send false location data to the other ships in the convoy. Next, he moved to the cargo bay. It was enormous, filled with containers stacked 3 stories high. Marcus pulled out a handheld scanner and began cataloging what was stored here. Medical supplies, ammunition, food rations, spare parts for warships. He found what he was looking for near the back: power cells for Kresh energy weapons. Thousands of them, enough to keep a fleet firing for months. Marcus placed electromagnetic pulse charges on each container of power cells. The charges were set on a timer, programmed to activate in 72 hours. When they did, the pulse would fry every power cell in the cargo bay, making them useless. The Kresh would deliver them to their fleet, store them in their armories, and never know they had been sabotaged until they tried to use them. It was psychological warfare at its finest. The Kresh would start questioning every supply shipment, every piece of equipment. Paranoia would spread through their ranks like a disease. Marcus was placing the last charge when he heard voices. Kresh crew members were entering the cargo bay. He froze, pressing himself against a container and activating his suit's full camouflage. The material made him nearly invisible, but if someone bumped into him or looked too closely, he would be discovered. 2 Kresh soldiers walked past, speaking in their clicking language. Marcus didn't understand the words, but he could read their body language. They were bored, going through routine checks. They stopped near his location, examining some cargo manifests on a data pad. Marcus held his breath. He was less than 2 meters away from them. One casual glance in his direction and everything would be over. The soldiers talked for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 2 minutes. Then they moved on, heading deeper into the cargo bay. Marcus waited another 5 minutes to be safe, then slipped back toward the exit. He had completed his mission. Now he just needed to get out alive. He retraced his path through the corridors, moving like a ghost. Once he had to duck into a maintenance closet when a crew member walked past. His suit's camouflage was good, but it wasn't perfect. Better to avoid being seen at all. He reached the maintenance hatch and opened it carefully. Space greeted him cold and silent. Marcus climbed back onto the hull and pulled himself along the cables to his ship. Once inside the Silent Hawk, he sealed the airlock and disconnected the cables. They would retract back into his ship, leaving no evidence he had ever been there. Marcus powered up his engines slowly and backed away from the transport. The convoy continued moving, unaware that one of their ships had been compromised. He waited until the convoy was several kilometers away before opening a secure channel to his ship's computer. The virus he had planted in the transport's communication system was already working, sending false data to the other ships about the convoy's location and status. Marcus set course back to his hidden base, exhausted but satisfied. In 3 days, the Kresh would discover that an entire shipment of power cells had been sabotaged. They would investigate, find nothing, and start questioning everything. Fear was the weapon, and Marcus was becoming very good at using it. Back at Fleet Command, Admiral Kreshva received a concerning report. 3 transport ships had reported minor system glitches over the past week. Nothing serious, just small errors in communication logs and sensor data. The kind of thing that happens with old equipment and cosmic radiation. But Kreshva had been a warrior long enough to recognize a pattern. Small glitches, minor errors, systems that worked fine but occasionally sent wrong data. Pull all recent transport logs, she ordered. I want every system error, every glitch, every unexplained anomaly from the past 3 months. Her staff worked through the night, compiling the data. What they found was disturbing. 23 transport ships had reported minor issues. All of them had traveled through areas where the Silent Hawk had struck before. It's not attacking just warships, Kreshva said slowly. It's hitting our supply lines. The intelligence officer nodded grimly. If the ghost has sabotaged our supplies, we won't know until we try to use them. It could be months before we discover the extent of the damage. Kreshva felt something she hadn't felt in years. Respect for an enemy. This human was thinking several moves ahead, playing a long game that most warriors wouldn't have the patience for. Order all supply ships to undergo full system scans before unloading, she commanded. And I want combat engineers inspecting every shipment of ammunition and power cells. If this ghost has tampered with our supplies, I want to know before they reach our frontline forces. As her officers scrambled to implement the new security measures, Kreshva pulled up the sector map again. The red dots marking Silent Hawk attacks had formed a pattern she only now recognized. They weren't random. Each strike had forced the Dominion to pull resources from the front lines for defensive purposes. 1 human, 1 ship. And the entire Dominion fleet was being forced to change its strategy. She had spent her career studying military tactics from hundreds of species across the galaxy. She had seen brilliant commanders and foolish ones. But this human was something different. This human understood that war wasn't just about destroying the enemy. It was about destroying their confidence, their morale, their certainty. Kreshva made a decision. She opened a priority channel to Dominion High Command. I need authorization to dedicate a full battle group to hunting the Silent Hawk, she said. This is no longer a minor security issue. This is a strategic threat that must be eliminated before it undermines our entire campaign. The response came back within hours. Authorization granted. Find this human and end the threat by any means necessary. Kreshva smiled. The hunt was officially on, and she was going to enjoy it. Marcus knew something had changed before he even received the warning from command. The Kresh fleet movements had shifted. Ships that used to spread out across the sector were now clustering together in hunting formations. Long-range patrols had tripled, and there were new sensor buoys being deployed everywhere, creating a web of detection systems that hadn't existed before. They were coming for him. The encrypted message from command confirmed his suspicions. Silent Hawk, be advised. Enemy has dedicated significant resources to hunting you. Battle group of 15 ships assigned to your sector. Recommend you go dark for minimum 2 weeks, acknowledge. Marcus sat in his command chair, staring at the message. 2 weeks of hiding meant 2 weeks of the Kresh being free to attack human positions. It meant colonies at risk, supply lines undefended, innocent people dying while he stayed safe in his asteroid base. He couldn't do it. He typed his response. Negative. We'll continue operations with increased caution. If they want to waste 15 ships chasing one target, that's 15 ships not attacking our people. Silent Hawk out. Command's reply was immediate. Marcus, don't be stupid. You're valuable. Stay alive. That's an order, he smiled. They had used his first name. They were worried. But worry didn't win wars. Understood. We'll stay alive. But I won't hide. Silent Hawk out. He closed the communication channel before they could argue further. Marcus knew what he was doing. The Kresh thought they were hunting him, but he was about to turn the hunter into the hunted. The Kresh battle group was impressive by any standard. 15 warships, including 3 heavy cruisers, each one carrying enough firepower to level a small moon. Admiral Kresheva had personally taken command of the hunt, transferring her flag to the lead cruiser. The fleet moved through the sector in a search pattern, their sensors sweeping space for any anomaly that might indicate the Silent Hawk's presence. They checked every asteroid field, every gas cloud, every debris field where a small ship might hide. But they found nothing. Days turned into weeks. The crews grew restless. Kresheva could feel the doubt creeping into her officers. They had expected a quick hunt, a decisive battle. Instead, they were chasing shadows. Admiral, we've swept this sector 3 times, her tactical officer reported. If the Silent Hawk was here, we would have found it. Kresheva drummed her claws thoughtfully. Perhaps. Or perhaps it was never here to begin with. The human could be anywhere in the sector. Then how do we find it? That was the question. How do you hunt something that leaves no trace? Kresheva had studied human military history looking for insights. Humans had developed many ways of tracking stealth vehicles during their wars. Radar, thermal imaging, acoustic sensors, satellites. But all of those methods relied on the target producing some kind of signature. The Silent Hawk produced nothing. No heat, no electromagnetic emissions, no gravitational distortion. It was as if the ship simply didn't exist, unless they could make it exist. Change of strategy, Kresheva announced. We're not going to find the Silent Hawk by searching. We're going to lure it to us. She pulled up the tactical map and pointed to a specific location. There's a convoy scheduled to pass through this region in 3 days. Medical supplies for our wounded at the front lines. We're going to let the Silent Hawk know about it. Her officers looked confused. Admiral, we don't have any secure way to leak information to the humans without them knowing it's a trap. Kresheva's mandibles clicked in what passed for a Kresh smile. Exactly. The human will know it's a trap. But here's what it won't know. We're going to make the bait so tempting that it will have to take the risk anyway. She began explaining her plan. The convoy would carry real medical supplies desperately needed at the front. But it would also carry something else. The personal shield generators that Kresh officers used in ground combat. Experimental technology, expensive and rare. If the Silent Hawk captured those shields, humans could reverse engineer them and gain a massive advantage. The human has shown a pattern of attacking supply convoys, Kresheva explained, and intelligence suggests that the Silent Hawk operator is working with limited support from human command. If they think they can capture technology that will help their species, they might take the risk even knowing it's a trap. The tactical officer nodded slowly. And when the Silent Hawk attacks? We'll have ships hidden in the nearby asteroid fields, powered down and waiting. The moment the target reveals itself, we converge from all sides. Even with its stealth technology, it won't be able to escape 15 warships at once. It was a good plan. A solid plan. But Kresheva had learned to respect her opponent. The Silent Hawk had survived this long because it was smart, adaptable, and ruthless when necessary. She would need to be just as smart to catch it. Marcus received the intelligence about the convoy within hours of Kreshva setting the trap. Human spies in Kresh-controlled space had intercepted a communication about the shipment of personal shield generators. He immediately suspected a trap. The intelligence was too convenient, too detailed. The Kresh wouldn't normally broadcast information about sensitive cargo shipments. They wanted him to know about it, but personal shield generators would be invaluable. If humanity could study that technology, it could save countless lives in ground battles. The shields were supposedly capable of stopping anything short of a direct hit from a plasma cannon. Marcus ran the numbers through his tactical computer. The convoy's route was predictable, passing through a region with multiple asteroid fields. Perfect ambush territory. The Kresh would hide ships there, waiting for him to make his move. He smiled. They were learning. They had studied his tactics and developed a counter-strategy. That was good. It meant they respected him as a threat. But Marcus had been planning for this moment since the beginning. He had always known that eventually the Kresh would try to trap him, so he had prepared contingencies. Instead of attacking the convoy directly, he would attack the attackers. Marcus spent 2 days positioning his ship in a location the Kresh wouldn't expect, above the convoy's route, not beside it. Most military tacticians thought in 2 dimensions, forgetting that space combat happened in 3. By positioning himself above the trap, he could observe the entire ambush without being caught in it. When the convoy arrived, Marcus watched from a safe distance. His sensors, operating in passive mode, could detect the Kresh warships hiding in the asteroid fields, 15 ships total. Just as intelligence had suggested, they were powered down, trying to minimize their sensor signatures. Amateur move. Powered down meant their shields were off and their weapons needed time to charge. They had sacrificed combat readiness for stealth. Marcus made his decision. He would hit one of the ambush ships, disable it, and escape before the others could react. It would send a message: you can't trap what you can't predict. He selected his target carefully. One of the heavy cruisers positioned on the outer edge of the ambush formation. It was the command ship, he was sure of it. Admirals always stayed close enough to observe but far enough to escape if things went wrong. The Silent Hawk drifted silently toward the cruiser, moving at a speed so slow that it was almost imperceptible. Marcus had disabled most of his ship's systems to minimize any energy signature. He was running on backup power, life support at minimum, weapons cold. He was essentially a flying rock, indistinguishable from the thousands of other rocks in the asteroid field. It took 3 hours to close the distance. 3 hours of careful navigation, avoiding debris and adjusting his course by tiny fractions. 3 hours of absolute silence and concentration. When he was within 50 meters of the cruiser, Marcus activated his electromagnetic pulse cannon. One shot, perfectly aimed at the ship's main power coupling. The pulse hit the cruiser and rippled through its systems. Lights flickered and died. The ship, already powered down, now had no way to restart its systems. It was dead in space. Before the other Kresh ships could react, Marcus fired his engines at full power and accelerated away at an angle they wouldn't expect. Not toward the convoy, not toward the nearest escape route, but straight up relative to the plane of the ambush. The Kresh ships powered up their systems and began scanning for him, but he was already gone, lost in the vastness of space above them. On the disabled cruiser, Admiral Kreshva felt the ship go dark around her. Emergency lights flickered on, showing her crew in confusion. "Status," she demanded. "Main power is offline, Admiral. Backup systems are failing. It's the same signature as the previous attacks." The Silent Hawk was here. Kreshva felt a mix of frustration and admiration. The human had seen the trap and, instead of avoiding it, had turned it against them. It had struck at the hunter instead of the prey. "Get me a damage report and restore power," she ordered. And someone explained to me how a single ship got past 15 warships without being detected. No one had an answer. Because the truth was simple and frightening. The Silent Hawk was better than them. Better at stealth, better at tactics, better at predicting enemy movements. Kreshva realized she would need to change her approach entirely. You couldn't trap a ghost with conventional tactics. You had to think like a ghost, move like a ghost, become unpredictable yourself. The hunt was far from over. In fact, it had just become much more interesting. The war was changing, and Marcus could feel it in every mission. The Kresh were getting smarter, more cautious, more unpredictable. They had stopped following standard patterns. Convoys now traveled at random times along random routes. Warships moved in formations that made no tactical sense, deliberately creating chaos in their own ranks to prevent him from predicting their movements. Admiral Kresheva was learning. Marcus floated in his hidden base, reviewing intelligence reports from human command. The news was mixed. His operations had successfully diverted significant Kresh resources away from frontline combat. Human colonies had been given time to evacuate civilians and strengthen defenses. The main human fleet had managed to win 2 major engagements because the Kresh had pulled ships back to hunt for him, but the cost was becoming clear. Marcus had been operating alone for 4 months now. The isolation was wearing on him. He talked to himself more often. He had dreams where he forgot what Earth looked like. Sometimes he woke up and couldn't remember why he was fighting. The neural interface he used to control his ship was causing long-term damage. Doctors had warned him that extended use would result in permanent neurological issues. Headaches, memory loss, difficulty concentrating. He was experiencing all of them now, but he couldn't stop. Not yet. Command needed 2 more months. 2 more months of disruption to give humanity time to organize a proper counteroffensive. He could last 2 more months, he had to. A new message came through the encrypted channel. Marcus decoded it and read the contents twice to make sure he understood correctly. Silent Hawk, new priority target identified. Kresh are establishing a forward command base in the Sigma system. Completion estimated in 3 weeks. Base will coordinate all Kresh military operations in 5 sectors. Destruction or significant damage to this base could set back enemy plans by 6 months. Command recommends assault but acknowledges high risk. Decision is yours. Additional support cannot be provided. Good hunting. Marcus stared at the message for a long time. A forward command base. It would be heavily defended, probably with the best sensors and weapons the Kresh had. Attacking it would be the most dangerous mission he had ever attempted. It would also be the most important. He opened a star chart and located the Sigma system. It was deep in Kresh-controlled territory, far from any human positions. Getting there would take a week of travel through enemy space. Getting back would be even harder, assuming he survived the attack. Marcus thought about the people he was protecting. Families living in constant fear of alien attacks. Children who had never known peace. Soldiers fighting and dying to hold the line against overwhelming odds. They all depended on people like him to give them a chance. He typed his response. Acknowledged. Will proceed to target. Silent Hawk out. Then he began preparing for what might be his final mission. The journey to the Sigma system took 8 days. Marcus moved slowly, using conventional travel speeds to avoid attracting attention. His ship's stealth systems were good, but they weren't perfect. If he moved too fast or used too much power, even his adaptive camouflage couldn't hide the energy signature completely. He passed several Kresh patrol routes, drifting past them like a piece of debris. Once, a destroyer came within 200 meters of his position. Marcus had powered down everything except life support and watched through his window as the massive warship glided past, its crew completely unaware that their most wanted target was floating right beside them. When he finally reached the Sigma system, Marcus spent a full day observing the command base from a distance. It was still under construction but already impressive. The base was built into a large asteroid, with docking facilities for dozens of ships and what looked like heavy defensive cannons mounted on the surface. There were 6 warships on permanent guard duty, rotating in shifts. Construction crews worked around the clock, and supply ships came and went constantly. Security was tight, with sensor buoys positioned in a sphere around the base. Marcus recorded everything, analyzing the patterns of ship movements and sensor coverage. He was looking for a gap, a moment of weakness he could exploit. He found it on the 3rd day of observation. During shift changes, there was a 10-minute window where the guard ships were repositioning, and the sensor coverage had slight gaps. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Marcus waited for the next shift change and made his move. The Silent Hawk accelerated slowly toward the base, threading through the sensor gaps like a needle through fabric. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure the sensors would pick it up. He reached the asteroid's surface without being detected and anchored his ship in a crater on the dark side, away from the construction lights. Then he suited up and stepped outside. The asteroid's low gravity made movement easy. Marcus bounded across the surface toward the base's main structure. He had studied the construction plans that human intelligence had stolen and knew exactly where to go. His target was the base's main power generator. It was still being installed, which meant it wasn't fully protected yet. If he could sabotage it correctly, the entire base would be crippled for weeks, maybe months. Marcus found the maintenance entrance and used his cutting tools to bypass the locks. He slipped inside and moved through dark corridors lit only by emergency lighting. The base interior was a maze of unfinished rooms and exposed wiring. He found the generator room and immediately knew he had a problem. There were guards. 4 Kresh soldiers standing watch over the massive reactor that would power the entire base. Marcus had hoped to avoid direct confrontation, but that wasn't an option now. He checked his weapons, a small plasma pistol and his neural stunner. Against 4 armed soldiers, his odds weren't great, but he hadn't come this far to turn back. He activated his suit's camouflage and moved closer, silent as a ghost. The guards were alert, scanning the room constantly. Marcus would need to take them all down simultaneously, or the survivors would sound the alarm. He positioned himself carefully, calculating angles and distances. Then he threw 4 neural stunner grenades at once, each one landing near a different guard. The grenades detonated with soft pops. The guards barely had time to react before the neural suppression waves hit them. They collapsed within seconds, unconscious but alive. Marcus moved quickly to the reactor. He had maybe 5 minutes before someone came to check on the guards. He pulled out his specialized charges and began placing them on critical components. These weren't designed to destroy the reactor completely. That would kill everyone in the base. Instead, they would cause a controlled overload that would damage the reactor beyond repair but allow time for evacuation. He was placing the last charge when alarms began blaring. Someone had discovered the unconscious guards. Marcus ran. He sprinted through the corridors as emergency doors began closing. He could hear Kresh soldiers shouting behind him, their footsteps echoing through the metal passages. He reached the maintenance entrance and dove through just as a blast door slammed shut behind him. Energy weapons fired at him, scorching the asteroid's surface around his feet. Marcus bounded across the crater toward his ship. The charges were set on a 5-minute timer. He had to be far away when they detonated. He reached the Silent Hawk and threw himself into the cockpit. The neural interface connected with a painful jolt as he powered up the engines. The guard ships had detected him now. Their weapons were charging, targeting systems locking onto his position. Marcus fired his engines at maximum power and shot away from the asteroid just as the Kresh ships opened fire. Energy beams tore through space where he had been moments before. Behind him, the charges detonated. The reactor didn't explode, but it released a massive electromagnetic pulse that cascaded through the base's incomplete systems. Lights flickered and died. Construction equipment shut down, and the guard ships momentarily lost power to their shields. Marcus used that brief window to accelerate past them. One ship managed to fire a desperate shot that grazed his hull, but he was already gone, diving into the asteroid field beyond the base. The Kresh ships pursued, but Marcus had planned his escape route carefully. He wove through the asteroids at speeds that would have been suicidal for larger vessels. His neural interface allowed him to react faster than any conventional pilot could, dodging obstacles by centimeters. Eventually, the pursuit ships fell back, unable to keep up without risking collision. Marcus continued for another hour before powering down and drifting, lost among millions of rocks. He had done it. The forward command base was crippled. It would take months to repair the damage, maybe longer to rebuild trust in the site's security, but Marcus was hurt. The glancing hit from the Kresh weapon had damaged his ship's hull and disrupted several systems, and his neural interface had overloaded during the escape, causing a seizure that left him barely conscious. He managed to send one message to command before passing out. Mission accomplished. Silent Hawk heavily damaged, going dark for repairs. Will contact when able. Then everything went black. Admiral Kresheva stood in the ruins of what was supposed to be her command base. The reactor chamber was devastated, The power systems destroyed beyond repair. It would take 6 months to rebuild, maybe longer. But what frustrated her most was the security footage. She had watched it a dozen times. One human, one soldier. Marcus woke up 3 days later with the worst headache of his life. The neural interface had burned out completely, leaving scorch marks on his skull where the connectors had overloaded. He was lucky to be alive. His ship was in bad shape. The hull breach had been automatically sealed by emergency systems, but multiple critical components were damaged. Life support was functioning at 60%. The adaptive camouflage was offline, and worst of all, his faster-than-light drive was completely destroyed. He was stranded in enemy territory with a damaged ship and no way to get home. Marcus forced himself to assess the situation rationally. He had supplies for maybe 3 weeks if he rationed carefully. His weapons still worked. The regular engines were functional, though traveling at sublight speeds would take months to reach friendly space. He opened his communication array and found dozens of messages from command, all asking the same thing: "Are you alive? Status report. Please respond." Marcus sent a brief message. "Alive but heavily damaged. FTL drive destroyed. Will need time to repair or arrange extraction. Silent Hawk out." The response came within minutes. "Extraction impossible in your current location. Crash have increased patrols throughout sector. Can you make it to the following coordinates?" A set of numbers followed, indicating a location 3 systems away. Marcus checked the coordinates. It was a neutral trading station on the border between Crash and human space. If he could get there, human agents could smuggle him out. But it would take 2 weeks of travel at sublight speeds, moving through heavily patrolled space with no stealth capability. He had no choice. Staying where he was meant eventual discovery and death. Moving gave him a chance, even if it was a small one. Marcus began repairs on the most critical systems. He couldn't fix everything, but he could make the ship spaceworthy enough to travel. The adaptive camouflage was beyond his ability to repair, but he had spare materials that could at least reduce his sensor signature. He worked for 5 days straight, sleeping only when exhaustion forced him to. His hands shook from fatigue and his vision blurred from the neural damage, but he kept working. The alternative was giving up, and that wasn't in his nature. On the 6th day, the Silent Hawk was as ready as it would ever be. Marcus plotted a course to the neutral station, deliberately choosing a route that avoided major shipping lanes and known patrol patterns, departed the asteroid field where he had been hiding, and began the long journey toward safety. The first 3 days were uneventful. Marcus drifted through empty space, conserving power and keeping all systems at minimum output. He passed a few Kresh ships in the distance, but they showed no interest in what appeared to be a small piece of debris drifting through space. On the 4th day, his luck ran out. A Kresh patrol consisting of 2 light cruisers appeared on his sensors. They were on an intercept course. Either they had detected something unusual about his ship, or they were just being thorough. Either way, Marcus had a problem. Without his camouflage system, the Silent Hawk was just another small spacecraft, distinctive enough that the Kresh might recognize it if they looked closely. And the reward for his capture had been increased to ridiculous amounts. Every Kresh crew in the sector was looking for him. Marcus changed course, trying to look like a civilian vessel going about normal business. He broadcast a fake identification signal, claiming to be a merchant ship carrying mining equipment. The Kresh ships adjusted their course to intercept. They were going to inspect him. Marcus considered his options. He could fight, but 2 light cruisers against his damaged ship meant certain death. He could run, but they were faster and would easily catch him. Or he could try to bluff his way through the inspection and hope they didn't look too closely. The communication channel opened. A Kresh officer appeared on his screen, mandibles clicking suspiciously. "Unknown vessel, you are in restricted space. Prepare to be boarded for inspection." Marcus activated his fake identity protocols. The computer generated a false captain's profile and ship registration. "This is Captain Hendricks of the merchant vessel Prosperity. We're just passing through on our way to the trading station at coordinates." He rattled off his destination. The Kresh officer studied his display, comparing the ship's profile to known vessels. Marcus held his breath. The false identity was good, but it wouldn't hold up under serious scrutiny. "Your ship configuration does not match the Prosperity's registered specifications," the officer said slowly. Shut down your engines and prepare for boarding. Marcus made a split-second decision. Surrender would mean capture, interrogation, and eventual execution. His only chance was to do something unpredictable. He fired his engines at full power and accelerated directly toward the nearest Kresh cruiser. The move caught them completely off guard. No sane pilot would charge a warship in a damaged civilian vessel, but Marcus wasn't charging to attack. He was using the cruiser's own mass as cover. He brought the Silent Hawk in close, so close that the cruiser's own sensors couldn't get a clear lock on him without risking hitting themselves. Then he fired his emergency acceleration boosters, reserves meant for life-or-death escapes. The Silent Hawk shot past the cruiser at speeds his damaged ship was never meant to handle. Alarms screamed as hull plates stressed and systems redlined, but Marcus kept going, pushing the ship beyond its limits. The Kresh cruisers pursued, firing energy weapons that Marcus barely dodged. One hit struck his port engine, causing it to flare out. He was down to one engine now, running on backup power and pure determination. Ahead, Marcus saw his salvation, a dense asteroid field, the kind that ships normally avoided because the navigation was too dangerous. But Marcus had flown through worse with a fully functional ship. With a damaged one, it would be nearly impossible. Nearly, but not quite. He dove into the asteroid field with both Kresh cruisers still in pursuit. Rocks the size of buildings rushed past on all sides. Marcus relied on instinct and reflexes honed by months of dangerous flying. Behind him, the Kresh ship slowed down, unwilling to risk collision. But they didn't give up. They split up, trying to flank him and cut off his escape routes. Marcus twisted through the asteroids, using the rocks as shields when the Kresh fired. His ship took multiple hits, each one damaging systems he could barely afford to lose. His communications array sparked and died. Life support dropped to 40%. Then he saw it, a gap in the asteroid field leading to open space beyond. If he could reach it, he might be able to outrun the Kresh long enough to hide. Marcus pushed his remaining engine to maximum and shot through the gap. The Kresh ships followed, emerging from the field seconds behind him. But Marcus had one more trick. As he cleared the asteroid field, he released his ship's emergency fuel pods. The pods contained enough volatile fuel to power the Silent Hawk for weeks. When they exploded, they created a massive fireball that temporarily blinded the Kresh sensors. In that moment of confusion, Marcus changed course 90 degrees and powered down his ship completely. He drifted in the darkness, hoping the Kresh would continue on their original pursuit vector. It worked. The two cruisers shot past his position, searching for him in the wrong direction. By the time they realized their mistake, Marcus had drifted far enough away to be lost among the background radiation of space. He waited in the darkness for 6 hours before powering up his systems again. The Silent Hawk was in terrible shape. One engine destroyed, communications dead, life support failing. He had maybe 3 days of air left, and he was still a week away from the trading station, but he was alive. Against all odds, he was still alive. Marcus set course for the station and prayed his luck would hold just a little longer. The trading station appeared on his sensors 5 days later. Marcus had stretched his supplies to the limit, recycling every bit of water and oxygen his systems could manage. He was weak from hunger and barely conscious from neural damage, but he had made it. He docked at the station using the last of his maneuvering fuel and stumbled out of the Silent Hawk. Human agents were waiting for him, having been alerted by command. They took one look at Marcus and immediately called for medical assistance. As they carried him to the medical bay, Marcus took one last look at his ship. The Silent Hawk was battered, scorched, and broken. It would never fly again, but it had served its purpose. For 5 months, one ship and one pilot had tied up significant enemy resources, disrupted supply lines, and given humanity time to organize its defense. Marcus closed his eyes as the medical team worked on him. He had done his part. Now it was time for others to carry the fight forward. 3 weeks later, Marcus woke up in a medical facility on Earth. The doctors told him he would recover, though the neural damage was permanent. He would never be able to use the interface again. His days as the Silent Hawk were over, but when he looked at the news feeds, he saw something that made him smile. The story of the Silent Hawk had spread throughout human space. Pilots were training in his techniques. Engineers were improving on his ship design. And dozens of new volunteers were signing up for similar missions. The Kresh had been hunting one ghost. Now they would face hundreds. Admiral Kresheva received the reports with growing concern. The Silent Hawk had been wounded and forced to retreat, but the damage was already done. Human morale was at an all-time high.